Imagine being a king so convinced your body was made of glass that you refused to let anyone touch you. Charles VI of France, also known as Charles the Mad, believed this wholeheartedly. After ascending to the throne at just 11, Charles ruled through regents until he came of age. Early in his reign, he was known as Charles the Beloved for his charisma and efforts to bring peace between France and England. But that wouldn't last. By his mid-20s, Charles suffered his first psychotic episode. During a military expedition in 1392, he suddenly drew his sword and attacked his own knights, killing several before collapsing. From then on, the episodes came frequently. He would forget his name, his children, and even that he was king. Most famously, he became obsessed with the belief that his body was made of delicate glass. He insisted on wearing iron rods sewn into his clothing to avoid shattering, and banned others from making sudden movements near him. Doctors at the time diagnosed him with melancholia, what we might now call schizophrenia, or bipolar disorder. His madness turned the court into a battlefield, with different factions vying for control. Civil war erupted in France. Charles lived nearly 30 years in this fragile mental state, effectively incapacitated, while his kingdom crumbled around him. His story is a haunting reminder that even a royal crown can't protect a mind under siege. Caligula's reign as emperor of Rome lasted only 4 years, but the legacy of his madness echoes through history like a scream. Born Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, he earned the nickname Caligula or Little Boots as a child mascot among Roman soldiers. He became emperor in 37 AD, and at first, he was welcomed, charming, generous, and filled with promise. But within months, his mind began to unravel. Historians suspect Caligula may have suffered from encephalitis or epilepsy, possibly exacerbated by lead poisoning from Rome's water systems. Whatever the cause, his behavior turned erratic and terrifying. He declared himself a living god, built a temple in his own honor, and forced senators to worship him. He held lavish feasts where he reportedly made guests watch executions for entertainment. But the most infamous symbol of his madness? His horse, Incitatus. Caligula adored the animals so much, he gave a marble stable, ivory manger, and jeweled collars. He often dined with it and, according to Suetonius, even planned to appoint a consul, the highest political office in Rome. While modern historians debate whether this was satire or delusion, the message was clear. Caligula held Roman institutions in contempt. His paranoia grew so extreme that he had family members executed on mere suspicion, and once ordered an entire section of the audience thrown into the arena for being bored. Eventually, even the Praetorian Guard had enough. In 41 AD, they stabbed him to death in a palace corridor. The reign of Little Boots had ended in blood. Christian VII was crowned King of Denmark and Norway in 1766 at the age of 17. From the beginning, it was clear that the young monarch was different. He displayed signs of mental instability as a teenager, fits of laughing, erratic speech, and compulsive behavior. Historians now believe he suffered from schizophrenia or severe autism. But in the 18th century, there was no understanding or compassion for mental illness. He was dismissed as mad. Christian's reign was largely symbolic. The real power shifted to his physician, Johann Friedrich Struensee, a German doctor who took advantage of the king's condition. Struensee rose from royal doctor to virtual dictator of Denmark in just a few years. He controlled state policy, enacted Enlightenment-style reforms, and even began an affair with Queen Caroline Matilda, Christian's English-born wife. Christian, meanwhile, descended into strange behavior. He reportedly flogged himself, ran through palace halls screaming, and was obsessed with masturbation, a habit his courtiers tried desperately to hide. He would mimic other people's voices, give nonsensical speeches in public, and often seemed detached from reality. When Struensee's reforms angered the aristocracy, they staged a coup. Struensee was arrested and gruesomely executed, his right hand cut off before he was beheaded. The queen was exiled. Christian VII remained on the throne in name, but was locked in a state of permanent infantilization. His son Frederick took over ruling as regent, and Christian spent the rest of his life in a fog of delusion and dependence. Ludwig, too, is remembered as a king who built castles straight out of fantasy, turrets, spires, and sweeping views of the Bavarian Alps. But behind the architectural magic was a man steadily slipping into a dream world of his own making. Ascending the throne at just 18 in 1864, Ludwig was idealistic, introverted, and obsessed with the operas of Richard Wagner. So obsessed, in fact, that he appointed Wagner to a high government position, despite political outrage, and funded his lavish productions with state funds. Ludwig withdrew from politics, preferring solitude in mountain castles and writing letters to dead monarchs. He spent millions constructing fantasy palaces like Neuschwanstein, Linderhof, and Herrenchiemsee, See, often based on scenes from Wagner's operas. While beautiful, these projects nearly bankrupted the state. He was nocturnal, hosting elaborate candlelit dinners for imaginary guests and dressing in full royal regalia to dine alone. His ministers began to panic. In 1886, they declared him mentally unfit, without even examining him directly. A few days later, Ludwig was arrested and deposed. Hours after his detainment, he went for a walk with a psychiatrist on the shores of Lake Starnberg. They were later found dead, floating in the water. No one knows exactly what happened, murder, suicide, or something more sinister. But in death, Ludwig became more powerful than he had ever been in life. Today, his castles draw millions of tourists, and the mystery of the Mad King only deepens with time. Ibrahim I's descent into madness is one of the darkest stories in Ottoman history. Born into captivity during his brother's reign, he spent his early years confined in the royal harem, a gilded prison designed to prevent political rivals. After his brother Murad IV died suddenly in 1640, Ibrahim was the last male heir. But palace officials found him hiding, convinced it was a trick to lure him out and kill him. He was forced to the throne, trembling and unstable. Nicknamed Ibrahim the Mad, his paranoia only worsened. He was obsessed with women, amassing a harem of over 280 concubines. He took advice from charlatans and mystics, believing he had divine powers. His fixation on sexual matters turned grotesque, once ordering his concubines to dress as animals and perform for him in elaborate pageants. But the most horrific act came during a jealous episode. Rumors spread that one of his concubines had committed infidelity. In a fit of rage, he ordered all 280 of them tied in sacks and drowned in the Bosporus. His erratic policies, endless spending, and reliance on corrupt advisors pushed the empire toward collapse. Eventually, even his own mother, Kozum Sultan, had enough. She conspired with palace officials to depose him in 1648. Ibrahim was imprisoned, and shortly after, strangled to death by royal order. His reign was brief but catastrophic, and his monstrous actions serve as a terrifying lesson in what unchecked authority and delusion can breed. Eric XIV ruled Sweden from 1560 to 1568, and is remembered as a brilliant yet tragically unstable monarch. From the start, Eric was highly educated, fluent in several languages, an expert in astronomy and fascinated with art. But his intellect was matched by deep paranoia. He believed himself divinely chosen and surrounded by traitors. His reign quickly took a turn for bizarre. He would wander the palace alone, muttering about conspiracies and painting strange symbols on walls. He accused nobles and even family members of plotting against him, often without evidence. His mood swung wildly, from generous and loving to violent and vindictive. In one infamous episode, Eric had several noblemen from the powerful Stuart family arrested. He interrogated them personally, convinced they were plotting treason. Then, in a fit of rage, he personally stabbed Nils Stuart to death twice in the dungeon of Uppsala Castle. After the murder, he reportedly collapsed into weeks of guilt and delusion. He refused to eat, refused to bathe, and wandered through court hallucinating. His erratic behavior reached a breaking point. In 1568, his half-brother John staged a coup and took the throne. Eric was imprisoned, but remained a threat as long as he lived. In 1577, he was served a bowl of arsenic lace pea soup, a royal meal that would be his last. Though historians debate whether the poisoning was ordered directly by the new king, the message was clear. The crown could not tolerate a madman, no matter how noble his blood. When Americans think of George III, they often picture a tyrant in a red coat. But the man who lost the American colonies was not only embattled politically, he was also fighting a brutal war inside his own mind. Born in 1738, George became king at just 22. At first, he was popular, a devout family man, conscientious, and deeply religious. But as the years progressed, cracks began to show. His first major breakdown came in 1765, around the time of the Stamp Act crisis. By the 1780s, his episodes became more frequent and terrifying. George would speak nonstop for hours, often foaming at the mouth and mixing up words. At times, he was seen talking to trees, believing they were foreign dignitaries. He would go days without sleep, his skin flushed purple from uncontrolled blood pressure spikes. His doctors restrained him with straitjackets and blistering treatments. One even claimed to have found the king biting into his own mattress. Historians now believe George suffered from porphyria, a genetic disorder that can cause both physical and psychiatric symptoms, including hallucinations, paranoia, and mania. Others argue it may have been bipolar disorder or arsenic poisoning, possibly from outdated medicine. Though George recovered intermittently, his final mental collapse came in 1810. He spent the last 10 years of his reign blind, deaf, and completely insane, unaware that his beloved wife had died. His son ruled as regent during this time. George III's descent into madness marked not only a tragic chapter in his life, but also a critical turning point in the political history of Britain and its empire. Peter III was Emperor of Russia for only 6 months, but that brief period was enough to reveal a mind completely unsuited for power. Born in Germany, Peter was brought to Russia as the heir of Empress Elizabeth and married off to a young German princess, Catherine the Great. Their union was a disaster. He ignored her, mocked Russian customs, and preferred playing with toy soldiers over governing. Peter idolized Frederick the Great of Prussia, even as Russia had just fought a bloody war against him. When he took power in 1762, he immediately made peace with Prussia and returned conquered territories without consultation. The Russian court was outraged. He was childish to the point of embarrassment. Witnesses claimed he would bark orders at mice in the palace, stage mock battles with dolls, and parade around dressed in military gear while giving imaginary commands. He even slept with his wooden toy soldiers. Most bizarrely, Peter was reportedly terrified of being assassinated. He ordered guards to patrol his chambers at night, but also fired his gun at random, suspecting shadows were assassins. The irony, of course, is that he was assassinated, but not by shadows, by his own wife. Catherine, far more politically astute, staged a coup with the military support. Peter was captured and imprisoned. Within days, he died under suspicious circumstances, likely murdered by one of Catherine's allies. His short, strange reign ended in obscurity, eclipsed by the brilliance of the woman he underestimated. James I of England, also James VI of Scotland, was a scholar, a writer, and the man who commissioned the King James Bible. But beneath the surface, he was one of the most eccentric and unhygienic kings in British history. James was obsessed with witchcraft, commissioning hundreds of executions, and even writing a book called Demonology. He believed demons lurked in every shadow, and that evil spirits could enter his body through women or water. As a result, he refused to bathe, fearing it would open his pores to demonic forces. He stank so badly that courtiers avoided standing near him. He was also terrified of knives, to the point that his food had to be chopped to a pulp before serving. Even his servants weren't safe. He regularly beat them during fits of paranoia, accusing them of plotting against him. But perhaps most disturbing was his obsession with young men. James surrounded himself with handsome male courtiers, showering them with titles and gifts. His favorites, like Robert Carr and George Villiers, were given enormous influence over state affairs. Rumors swirled that the king's infatuation had crossed into obsession, possibly even sexual relationships. His personal habits became court gossip. His clothes were often filthy, his teeth rotted, and his hands constantly fidgeted as he muttered to himself. Despite these eccentricities, James held power for decades, but many believe that his oddities, paranoia, and extreme favoritism weakened the monarchy and paved the way for civil unrest. Henry VIII is often remembered as a swaggering, six-wife king who broke with the Catholic Church, but by the end of his life, he had become a grotesque figure of bloated flesh and deranged judgment. In his youth, Henry was athletic and handsome, but after a jousting accident in 1536 left him with a leg injury, everything changed. The wound never fully healed, became ulcerated, and caused excruciating pain. Unable to exercise, Henry gained enormous weight, ballooning to over 400 pounds. The physical decline was mirrored by mental instability. He became paranoid, irritable, and cruel. He ordered the executions of two of his wives, Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard, as well as close friends and advisors like Thomas More and Thomas Cromwell. He saw plots everywhere and became increasingly reclusive. Doctors treated him with mercury, further damaging his mind. He reportedly experienced hallucinations, delusions, and wild mood swings. By his final years, he could barely walk, and the smell of his infected legs filled every chamber he entered. His courtiers used perfumed handkerchiefs just to endure being near him. When Henry died in 1547, his body was so swollen and rotted that it exploded in the coffin, spilling noxious fluids onto the church floor. Some believed it was divine justice for his many sins. Whatever the truth, Henry's end was as dramatic and terrifying as his reign, and a final symbol of the monarch consumed by his own appetites. Byzantine emperors were often theatrical, but Justin II took imperial madness to horrifying new levels. He ruled from 565 to 578 AD and succeeded his uncle, the famed Justinian I. But where Justinian built an empire, Justin unraveled it. Initially, Justin II was competent, but soon after a series of military defeats, especially against the Persians, he began to lose touch with reality. He became increasingly paranoid, suspecting treason everywhere. He began shouting at officials during court meetings, issuing bizarre decrees, and laughing maniacally during state crises. The turning point came when he started biting his servants. Yes, biting. Reports say he would fly into rages, leap from his throne, and sink his teeth into the flesh of nearby aides. One record claims he bit a eunuch so savagely that the man lost part of his shoulder. These attacks became frequent and terrifying. Justin's doctors diagnosed him with insanity, and his wife Sophia acted quickly. She installed a regent, Tiberius, who ruled in Justin's name while the emperor was confined to his chambers, often screaming, sobbing, or violently thrashing. At one point, Justin demanded that organs be played 24/7 to soothe his mind. In a final act of lucid despair, Justin II reportedly ordered his own euthanasia by overdosing on medication, an extraordinarily rare event in royal history. His tragic end reminds us that even in the grandeur of Constantinople, mental illness could ravage the most powerful mind. Few names in history are more synonymous with royal insanity than Nero Claudius Caesar, the infamous Roman emperor who ruled from 54 to 68 AD. Though the story of him literally fiddling while Rome burned may be apocryphal, the violin didn't exist yet. The truth is equally chilling. Nero came to power as a teenager, guided by his ambitious mother, Agrippina. But within 5 years, he had her murdered, along with his wife Octavia and his stepbrother Britannicus. He was obsessed with Greek art and performance and insisted on acting in public theaters, even forcing senators to sit through hours of his singing under threat of death if they left early. During the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD, Nero's palace was conveniently untouched, and many believed he started the blaze to clear land for his massive new palace, the Domus Aurea. In its aftermath, he scapegoated the Christians and subjected them to horrific tortures, burning, crucifixion, and being torn apart by dogs. As his paranoia grew, Nero executed dozens of senators and generals, accusing them of conspiracy. He even forced his own tutor, Seneca the philosopher, to commit suicide. Toward the end of his reign, Nero dressed in animal skins and attacked people tied to stakes in his private gardens, acting out primal fantasies. When rebellion finally toppled him, Nero attempted to flee, but failed. He ultimately committed suicide at age 30, his last words reportedly being, "One artist dies in me." His reign stands as one of the most grotesque spectacles of imperial delusion ever recorded. The Jingde Emperor, born Zhu Hozhao, ruled Ming China from 1505 to 1521 and might be the most bizarre ruler in Chinese history. Instead of governing, Zhu built a massive pleasure palace and filled it with concubines, exotic animals, and actors. He frequently disappeared from Forbidden City to dress as a commoner and play games in the streets, calling himself General Zhu. But it wasn't just escapism. It was deeply unhinged. He once declared war on Mongolia, only to dress as a soldier and march in parade while leaving the actual military at home. He insisted that documents be addressed to his made-up alter ego, Zhu Shou, and would refuse to read anything addressed to him as emperor. His behavior with animals bordered on delusional. He kept tigers as pets, and one day declared that he himself was a tiger, roaring, crawling on all fours and attacking servants. He also kept leopards and trained them to perform tricks, often releasing them during palace parties to liven things up. In a tragic-comic twist of fate, Zhu died after falling out of a boat during a drunken stunt on the Grand Canal, reportedly while chasing a tiger or wrestling with one. He caught a fever from the icy water and never recovered. His reign left China in administrative shambles, and his obsession with fantasy over duty marked him as a truly mad monarch in the annals of history. Don't just learn history. Feel its madness. If this episode shocked you, it's just the beginning. We dig deeper into the dark side of power every week. Like, comment your favorite lunatic, subscribe to the Crit Stories, and turn on the bell so you never miss what history tried to bury.